Imagine taking the heaviest, most terrifying elements of clinical therapy, the kind of raw, painful processing that usually happens behind closed doors, and transmuting all of that into a catchy, bass-heavy album.
Yeah, it sounds almost impossible.
Right. But today, on the deep dive, we are dissecting exactly that, an alchemical exit. We're looking at a really unique concept album called Phone Therapy Volume 2 by the artist Ti-Fi.
Which is such an ambitious project.
It really is. It literally turns real telehealth trauma sessions into this blend of melancholic acoustic pop, emo rap, and deep 808 trap beats. So it's not just music, it's a clinical roadmap rendered into audio.
Exactly. It operates as a literal psychological blueprint. And what we're actually unpacking today isn't just, the production value or the aesthetics of the album, as cool as they are.
Right.
We're diving into the profound clinical psychology embedded in these beats, because the artist is actually charting the biological and neurological progression of trauma recovery.
Which is wild to hear in a trap beat.
It really is. We are going to look at the mechanics of the mind here. The why and the how behind the survival tactics mapped out in this music.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what I absolutely love about this project is how it completely strips away the illusion of, having it all together.
Yeah, it doesn't hold back.
Not at all. It starts from a place of absolute chaos. But before a person can even begin to process deep trauma, they must first build an architecture of containment. You can't rebuild a house while a hurricane is actively tearing off the roof.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And Ti-Fi introduces this concept of boundary setting through the lens of endurance.
Right. And the clinical reality there is that trauma processing carries an immense cognitive and biological load. It is exhausting.
Oh, I bet.
So in the opening stages of the album, specifically in the track called Monday's Wait, we hear a detailed strategy for managing that load. The lyrics outline this very intentional batching of therapy and counseling sessions back-to-back on a single day.
Which is Monday.
It's exactly, on Monday. The artist describes spending the weekend, pulling out the files and gathering the rain, which is, it's a metaphor for the intense emotional preparation required to just face those shadows.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a terrible way to spend a weekend.
Yeah, it doesn't sound fun.
Like, why voluntarily consolidate all of that heavy emotional lifting into a localized 3-day window?
Well, because spreading that emotional processing out over the course of an entire week, it allows the trauma to dictate the rhythm of your whole life.
Oh, I see.
Right. If you are constantly opening those psychological files on, say, a Tuesday afternoon or a Thursday evening, your nervous system never gets a chance to return to baseline. You're always on edge.
You're just living in it.
Exactly. By localizing the hit, you are constructing a rigid boundary. You box up the shadows into Sunday and Monday to explicitly protect Tuesday through Friday. You are dictating the terms of engagement.
It's like taking a feral animal that's destroying your house and putting it in a digital cage. You become the one holding the remote.
Yes, exactly that.
You decide when the cage opens. And that idea of a digital cage is really the entire premise of the sublimation process we hear next.
Right, and the concept of sublimation is vital here. For those who might not know, sublimation is a defense mechanism where unacceptable or harmful impulses are transformed into a socially acceptable, or in this case, a creative output.
Like making an album.
Precisely. And the album illustrates this brilliantly in the track Riot to Render. The mind is described as a riot with traumatic memories bouncing endlessly off the mental walls.
Just total chaos.
Absolute chaos. And the intervention is externalization. It's booting up the digital audio workstation, the DAW, and plugging that raw, terrifying nervous system energy right into a machine.
But let's pause on that mechanism for a second.
Yeah.
Because, does simply exporting a digital audio file actually neutralize a physiological trauma response?
Wait.
It just feels a little too mechanical to say, I made a beat and now my trauma is cured.
Oh, it definitely doesn't cure the trauma.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally alters your spatial and psychological relationship to it.
Okay, how so?
When an intrusive memory is trapped in your head, it feels infinite. It has no shape, no boundaries, and no end. You're just drowning in it.
Right.
But by rendering that trauma into a discrete audio file, you give it a definitive start point and an end point. You literally give it a volume slider.
Wow, yeah. I didn't think about it like that.
It forces the abstract terror into a concrete, measurable format. The trauma is now locked on a hard drive instead of coursing through your nervous system.
That's powerful.
It really is. You aren't destroying the ghost. You are putting it in a container where you have the power to press play or pause.
And once that chaos is finally contained, once you've sort of stopped the bleeding, you have to look at the lies the brain tells itself just to survive the unexplainable.
Got cognitive traps,
All
yeah.
right, this is where the psychological mechanics get really dark, specifically when dealing with the locus of control.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a track called The False Locus that captures this just heartbreaking survival tactic. The lyric goes, "I wrap the situation in a blanket made of blame, because if it was my fault, then the world still makes some sense."
What's fascinating here is how the brain invents self-blame as a shield against the randomness of evil.
It's so counterintuitive.
It is, but from an evolutionary psychology perspective, the human brain is just a pattern recognition machine. It despises chaos.
Right, it needs things to make sense.
Exactly. So when a person, especially a child, is subjected to severe trauma or abuse, the idea that it happened for absolutely no reason is terrifying. It means the world is entirely unpredictable and unsafe.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the intuitive assumption is that blaming yourself for the abuse you suffered would just, add an unbearable amount of weight to your pain.
Right.
Why would the brain actively choose guilt over innocence?
Because guilt provides a false sense of order. The twisted logic of the prefrontal cortex, which is just trying to make sense of the amygdala's panic, it says, if I cause this pain, then I have the agency to prevent it from happening next time.
Oh, wow, so it's an illusion of control.
Exactly. The brain says, if I was just better or quieter or smarter, I could have stopped it. It is a desperate bid for control in a completely powerless situation.
That is heavy.
It is. And the heavy bass drop in the chorus of that track musically represents the grueling process of dropping that illusion. It's the moment of handing the responsibility back to the perpetrator and finally recognizing that the locus of control was never yours to begin with.
It's terrifying to realize that the brain would rather accept the guilt of abuse than accept that the universe is random.
Yeah, it's a hell of a survival mechanism.
But that kind of twisted logic is exactly what cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is designed to dismantle, right? And the album explores this in the track Cognitive Distortions. And we aren't just talking about, swapping the word always for sometimes, which is how CBT is often oversimplified.
Far from it. CBT is about fundamentally rewiring neural pathways.
Okay.
See, anxiety acts as an internal liar. It utilizes automatic negative thoughts and all-or-nothing thinking to catastrophize every bad outcome and minimize every victory.
Like, nothing goes my way, everything is ruined.
Exactly. And in neurobiological terms, there's a saying, neurons that fire together wire together.
Right, I've heard that.
So if your default assumption is that a stranger is a monster, your brain carves a deep, highly efficient superhighway for that thought.
It becomes the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And the lyrics in this track describe taking out a journal and actively putting that twisted ideology on trial. Like searching for the gray area.
It's about demanding evidence from your own brain.
Right, and in the interlude, the therapist's voice notes that you have survived 100% of your bad days.
Which is such a great line.
It really is. That is the empirical evidence you force the brain to look at, forcing it to pave a new road instead of defaulting to that superhighway of panic.
But, and this is crucial, cognitive restructuring is only half the battle.
Because of the physical reaction.
Exactly. You cannot just outthink trauma. Your prefrontal cortex can rationalize all it wants, but if your amygdala is still sounding the alarm, your biology will override your logic every single time.
The body keeps the score, basically.
The body keeps the ledger, yes. And this is where the deep dive transitions from the psychological to the physiological.
We see this shift perfectly in the track Somatic Shift, which dives into somatic experiencing.
Yes, a very physical modality.
And the actual flow of the emo rap in this song mimics the uncomfortable, rapid spanning of the physical body. It maps out exactly where the trauma physically lives.
Shoulders pressed up to the ears.
Exactly, stomach height in knots, bracing for a hit.
Because when the mind dissociates to protect your consciousness, the physical body has to take the impact. The psoas muscle tightens, cortisol floods the system, and the sympathetic nervous system just kicks into overdrive.
So you're basically in constant fight or flight.
Yeah. The therapeutic work here is a conscious biological intervention. Rolling the shoulders back, opening the palms, utilizing diaphragmatic breathing. You are manually overriding the system.
Telling it to calm down.
Sending a chemical signal to the brain that the immediate environment is safe.
But, regulating the muscles and the breathing is really only a temporary fix if the brain is still playing the worst moments of your life on a loop in the background.
Right, the memories keep triggering the response.
So to fix that, we have to talk about hacking the brain's filing system.
Hmm.
Ti-Fi captures this using the physical rhythm of EMDR therapy in the track called Bilateral.
Oh, EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating clinical tool.
I've always wondered how it actually works.
Well, the track describes using the butterfly tapping left, right on the collarbones.
Okay.
During normal REM sleep, our eyes dart back and forth, right, which helps the brain process and file away the day's events.
Right.
But traumatic memories don't get filed properly. They get stuck in the active, vivid present. EMDR manually triggers that bilateral processing while you are awake.
So when you are crossing the meridian with that left-right rhythm, what is actually happening in the brain?
You are heavily taxing the brain's working memory. The brain only has so much processing power.
Okay, that makes sense.
If it has to focus on the physical sensation of the left-right tapping, it simply does not have the bandwidth to render the traumatic memory in vivid, terrifying 4K resolution.
Wow, so it degrades the quality of the memory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you are forcing the brain to recall the memory while simultaneously distracting it, the emotional intensity degrades. The memory gets rewritten and stored back in the filing cabinet as a much less potent gray file.
That's incredible.
The tapping acts as a metronome of safety in the present moment, tethering you to the room while the brain defangs the past.
But even with all of that rewiring, the system can still crash, right?
Oh, absolutely.
When panic gets completely overwhelming and you tip into a full-blown panic attack, the album actually gives us a real-time walkthrough of a DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, a distress tolerance skill called TIPP.
Right, TIPP.
Yeah, the track TIPP, the scale starts with these frantic, gasping breaths. The nervous system is totally defaulting.
And at that level of hyperarousal, logic and tapping are totally useless. The protocol is a hard physiological reset.
So what do?
You stagger to the sink, you submerge your face in ice-cold water, and you trigger what's called the mammalian dive reflex.
This sounds exactly like hitting CTRL-Alt-Delete on your own nervous system to force a hard biological reboot.
That's exactly what it is. It's a CTRL-Alt-Delete, but it's hijacking an ancient evolutionary mechanism.
How?
When cold water hits the trigeminal nerve on your face while you hold your breath, your brain thinks you are a mammal diving into deep, freezing water.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to conserve oxygen and survive, it immediately stimulates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It forcibly slows your heart rate down.
That is wild.
It is a biological mandate. Your
Yeah.
body has no choice but to comply. And from there, the track guides the listener through paced breathing, inhaling for 4 seconds, exhaling for 6, and paired muscle relaxation, just to keep the system anchored in the present.
Okay, so you've contained the chaos in a DW. You've challenged the false locus of control. You know how to hack your working memory with EMDR and, like you said, hijack your vagus nerve to stop a panic attack.
It's a heavy toolkit.
It is. But armed with all of this, the survivor actually has to step out into the physical world.
Right. Eventually, you have to leave the room.
And that means confronting the environmental triggers. The track exposure route tackles the visceral toll of exposure therapy.
Right. And exposure therapy involves physically revisiting the origin of the pain, or at least the locations associated with it.
Which sounds terrifying.
It is. Your hippocampus, which deals with spatial memory, has linked that specific environment with a life-threatening danger. When you walk back into that space, the air feels thin, your heart beats in your throat, and the pavement itself seems to hold the ghost of the trauma.
Every instinct is telling you to run.
Your instinct is absolutely to flee.
And the track builds this incredible, suffocating tension until a massive 808 bass drop hits, and the lyrics declare a total refusal to retreat. It says, "I'm reclaiming all the ground."
Because the clinical goal of exposure therapy is to rewrite that environmental association.
Okay.
The physical space is exactly the same, but the survivor's internal toolkit has changed.
Right, they have the coping skills now.
By staying in the frame, tolerating the distress, and not running away, you prove to your nervous system that the environment is no longer inherently dangerous.
The danger is in the past.
The danger is a ghost. You teach the brain that you can breathe in the space that used to suffocate you.
But reclaiming that space doesn't mean your understanding of the past suddenly becomes perfectly clear.
No, definitely not.
There is a track that explores the reality of fragmented memory called Fractured Frames. It paints the timeline as a blur, like a puzzle with 100 missing parts.
Trauma intentionally scatters memories.
Why does it do that?
During a traumatic event, a surge of cortisol can actually inhibit the hippocampus from properly encoding memory. The mind literally hides the pieces or fragments the narrative so you can survive the overwhelming emotional impact of the moment.
That makes sense.
But the instinct in recovery is usually intense frustration. We demand answers from the shadows. We want a perfect, clean timeline.
And this is where I want to challenge the common narrative around healing because it feels so counterintuitive.
How do you mean?
Well, we usually assume that getting better means remembering every detail perfectly.
Yeah.
Confronting every single piece of the puzzle. But this track posits the exact opposite, that the gaps themselves are the survival mechanism.
Yes. That is the core of radical acceptance in therapy.
Okay.
The blank spots are not a failure of your memory. They are a brilliantly designed defense mechanism. The nervous system basically pulled the plug to save the hardware from a power surge.
Wow. I love that analogy.
You do not need a perfect sequential timeline to validate the reality of the pain or to process the emotion left behind.
Right.
The gaps are just as valid as the vivid memories. Radical acceptance means making peace with the missing pieces, honoring the survival instinct that created those blackouts, and stitching together a cohesive life with the narrative you have today.
So what does this all mean? When you accept the gaps, when you rewire the biology, the fundamental nature of your defense mechanisms changes.
It evolves, yeah.
Yeah, right. Track 5, the lighter armor, addresses this evolution of dissociation. Dissociation is described as a heavy, rusty suit of iron armor. In the absolute darkest moments of the trauma, it was necessary. It kept the arrows out.
But the trade-off of wearing an iron suit is that you cannot feel the sun.
Oh, that's heavy.
It extinguishes every spark of joy and isolates you from human connection.
Yeah.
It essentially swallows your hope.
So the breakthrough is the realization that you don't have to walk around in that heavy iron anymore.
Exactly.
You drop it on the floor and trade it for lighter armor. This means using your voice, practicing the word no, and establishing healthy interpersonal boundaries.
It's a total shift in defense.
It's like taking off a suffocating medieval suit of iron and realizing you now have the agility and the spatial awareness to simply dodge the arrows altogether. The lighter armor flexes with you. It protects you, but it lets the light in.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the transition from heavy dissociation to lighter boundary-based armor is the ultimate goal of all clinical therapy.
Which is what?
Reclaimed agency. You are no longer a silent, passive vessel reacting to the world. You have cultivated the internal tools to navigate the present without being weighed down by the outdated survival tactics of the past.
Which brings us to the culmination of the album, Answering the Call. It is this beautiful acoustic resolution that honors the therapeutic alliance. The survivor spends the track thanking the therapist, thanking them for sitting in the shadows, holding the space, and catching every fall.
But the defining moment of the entire project happens in the spoken word outro.
Yeah, this part gives me chills.
The therapist's voice explicitly redirects that credit back to the artist. The therapist notes that, yes, they provided the clinical map, but the survivor is the one who actually walked the grueling road.
They did the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The survivor tolerated the exposure, challenged the cognitive distortions, and regulated their own nervous system. The therapist says, I just held the map. You did the work. You saved yourself.
It is an incredibly earned realization of power. We've spent this whole time looking at the incredible architecture our minds build. We explored how to contain chaos in a digital file, how EMDR taxes the working memory to defang the past, how to hijack the mammalian dive reflex to drop the heart rate, and what it truly means to drop the heavy iron of dissociation.
And these are not just abstract musical metaphors.
Not at all.
They are tangible, biological tools for taking the reins of your own mind. They are a testament to the sheer resilience of the human nervous system and the structured clinical pathways we can use to guide it back to safety.
We spent so much time today examining the elaborate, sometimes painful illusions our brains construct, like the false locus of control, just to protect us in our darkest, most chaotic moments.
It's amazing what the brain will do to survive.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, what other hidden, brilliant mechanisms is your mind quietly running right now, just to keep you moving forward?
That's a great question to leave on.
You might not have an 808 beat to put behind it yet, but your brain is doing that invisible work right now. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, thank you for taking the deep dive with us today.